right. So today, in this episode, I have Kevin Barrett with me. Thank you for coming on the show, Kevin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Always a fun time when I get to, kind of interview a realtor, somebody on the other side of my fence in our business. As a lender, it's always great to have relationships with realtors. It's important. And just before the mics were rolling, we were just talking about scenarios and kind of going through things. So it's always good to have these relationships, so that we can kind of give our expertise to each other. But you're also a Wilmington guy.
Right.
Multiple kids in town, right?
Yes, I got two beautiful 6-year-old twins.
Right.
Yes. 6
years old, so a few years above me on the kid age, but we both are dads in town. We're both involved with the sports.
Right.
Involved with the schools. And then involved with the real estate in this area. So I guess first and foremost, let's go there. Where's the real estate market at these days? Are we seeing an up in supply? Are we seeing more demand? What are we looking
right.
at?
I mean, inventory is still pretty low, and
Yeah.
it is a cyclical environment, meaning, spring was white hot, and I think that even continued throughout summer. Sometimes there is a little bit of a lull, but it went straight through summer. And it might have tailed off a little bit. You do have the election looming.
Right.
Interest rates, it was, I think we were just talking about that, where the Fed funds, the rate was cut. And most people see the headlines, they expect the rates to drop, but they actually went the other way. And I think they might be around 6.5%, which is still historically better, even last year where they were right around 8%. So there's obviously multiple factors. There's actually 9 single-family homes for sale in Wilmington. So, not at historic lows, but probably not towards the peak either.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, 9 homes is, it's medium,
Right.
What do you see on a lot of supply? What would you see, like 20?
20, yeah. Usually 20, 25, around that range.
And Wilmington definitely, along with a couple of the other towns, has been one of the huge turnovers in the last 10 years. I'm one of them.
Right.
You're one of them.
Yeah.
But, our neighborhoods are getting younger. They're bringing a lot more kids into town. It's a great place to live.
Right. I think that the high school is obviously fairly new, and that draws a lot of families to town. And, they're doing, it seems like the traffic's probably a little bit too much, but that means there's development, in different areas of the town. So, yeah, a lot of good happening.
That's amazing. So that's something to be optimistic about our future, is that this town is still white hot in a lot of ways. Now you talked about schools, but I just wanted to kind of touch on the rates real quick, because I think you're correct in a lot of senses. When we had the last Fed meeting, rates were cut. And so I think the population immediately assumed that is where mortgage rates will actually go along with it. However, what we're seeing is a lot of positive job reports, a lot of reports like, the inflation index and things like that. They're actually not going in the directions we want. The cut didn't necessarily do what the government, I think, intended. But more or less what we didn't see during those rate cuts were a unanimous vote by the Fed, which we were hoping to see everybody on board with. We need to cut these rates. We actually didn't see that from the committee.
Right.
We saw much of a mixed vote. And then I think one of the other things that we definitely saw was not a lot of mention about a second cut, a future cut.
Right.
Now, people don't realize, when Fed Chair Powell's, looming around the country and doing his visits and speaking at colleges, he's mentioning the rate cuts up front that happened in September. So those were actually priced in prior to the meeting.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, the news was out. It was baked in. And I think that's where, the cuts already happened. It's the... and there is some encouragement where we didn't get rate cuts for almost, for a long
years.
time.
Right.
And now we're looking at possible, a few more rate cuts, even this year, and then, several next year. So there's the housing market is pretty resilient. I think, it will next year, you'll see the rates drop. And usually the one quick stat for you is every 1% that the interest rate drops, that brings 5 million more buyers into the market. So 5 million more buyers are able to afford a home, and that's throughout the country.
Okay, so that's a good point to kind of go there, is because when we didn't see all that happen and we did see rates tick up, actually, what we're seeing is people got to live somewhere. So that we're always seeing the housing market exist. It's not a job that just goes away, because people need to move and need to live. But when they have a little bit more choice in the matter, when they have like the ability to say, I'm not ready to quite sell an upgrade yet or sell and downgrade yet, just because of really where home prices are. I think a lot of people are a little bit shying away from that, mixed in with the rates. So you just kind of touched on something right there. I think a lot of people are thinking, I'm going to wait to get back into the markets until the rates drop, right?
Right.
Which if 5 million people can get back into the market when the rate drops a point, that's going to cause demand to fly up through the roof, no?
Exactly. Completely agree. And it's a catch-22. And I think, obviously, I'm biased being a real estate agent, but there's always opportunity in the market. And based on somebody's situation, you know, there is always opportunity to go out and buy. I mean, the other stat I'll give you, because I'm a little bit of a data guy, I went to an engineering school, but for the past 80 years, the real estate market has not appreciated 6 times. And so that's pretty powerful. If you're somebody that, again, it's a case-by-case basis, if you're looking to live somewhere long-term, chances are your home's going to appreciate.
So you said you're a little bit biased, which as a realtor, that's a given, right? That you're in the market to sell homes, to move homes, to do that. But like, let's talk the finance side of that, because it's actually, there's a little more common sense there that you need to use, because as a finance guy, yes, obviously I'm also biased because I do loans for a living, but in reality, like, you can always renegotiate your rate in the future. And so these prices are going to go up.
Exactly.
So what you'll save monthly in costs with the rate, you're going to end up paying way more by the equity build that's happening around the country. And like you said, 6 drops in 80 years? It's not a common thing to happen. It can happen, but everybody, I think, is waiting for this bubble burst. I think a lot of us grew up in 2008. You grew up in around that, and we all heard and watched that. Right?
Yeah, and I think it's a different market than 2008. The inventory was up here. Now we're down here. And so, you know, I'm maybe not the smartest guy you ever met, but inventory's low. That means prices are going to continue to go up. And we've seen that the past couple of years. I don't think there's going to be a doom and gloom day. You know, anything can happen, but for the most part, housing is probably one of the more stable investments you can park your money in, and actually it's a functional asset where you can live there and you know, raise a family or whatnot.
Now, one of the things that I did notice, so the 2009, 2008 bubble burst, everybody seems to fall back on when it comes to this idea, right? What a lot of people don't realize is in most recessions, the price of homes actually usually goes up. This recession, they didn't. So everybody thinks next recession, we're going to see a price drop in homes. But what you really just have to think about is what caused the 2008, 2009 recession. It was the mortgage industry, sorry. But we were the ones causing the actual recession itself because of lax lending rules and things of that nature. Now, we've both been in the business far more recently where that is not the way we underwrite anymore. That is not the way homes are given. It used to be a handshake with a purchase sale.
If you could breathe on a mirror, you could maybe get it.
If you could literally breathe, you could get a loan. But nowadays, there's a lot more underwriting and there's a lot more regulation involved in what we do. So these homes are actually being properly underwritten, and we're taking into factors like, you know, bubble bursts, the way we saw it was really based on the backbone of our markets. So we're not seeing that with this new recession coming. It's not caused by a housing, you know, bubble burst. So I don't think we're going to see that price drop, right? I mean,
no, I don't predict anything substantial. And I was in the market back then. Again, it was completely different. I think, you know, right now there's a lot of factors, and you mentioned some of them: inflation, the jobs report that a lot of folks are looking at the interest rate, and that's where you can't look at the Fed funds rate. You got to look at the 10-year Treasury. That's more aligned to the interest rate, the jobs report, and so, you know, it's overall. I think the housing market. I don't want to say it's too big to fail, but it's pretty resilient. And, you know, again, there's always opportunity in the market. I think now is a good time where most folks say, all right, school's back in session, I might take a break. But if you're a seller, what I've been telling folks is that you have the most serious buyers, that the buyers that are looking, going to open houses, setting up showings, those are buyers that you're actually, if you're going to put your house on the market, that's the prime buyer you're looking for, that they're more motivated to buy.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that's huge because I think you touched on it right there. Our mortgage rate, you're much more, it makes way more sense to watch the 10-year bond because that's where we actually coincide and we correlate with. We don't correlate with the Fed fund rate. That's really the cost of money. Now, the Fed has been raising that rate over the last few years to actually slow the economy, to fight inflation. And what we're seeing with all these reports is it's not working.
Yeah.
And the only solution now, if we could predict this, we'd be on Wall Street. We'd be sitting in some different rooms, and I don't think they'd let us breathe. Yeah. We'd literally be sitting behind computers all day just being like, what's next? What's next? And I don't think anybody can really predict it. So, like, I don't want to go and, like, kind of make predictions on it or anything of that nature. But as far as, where that fund rate is going, where the inflation is, where the job reports are, like a lot of people, a lot of economists, a lot of well-studied individuals are saying like there has to be a massive amount of debt being taken on by the country at the moment. Like that's the only way we can continue to have a white hot economy with rates up in the 8.5s.
Right.
That affects cars, credit cards, houses, not just our market, but all markets.
Exactly.
And they tried to make everything more expensive to slow it down, to slow inflation, to keep the cost of rising things like slower. It's just not seeming to work as well as they thought. And I think we're seeing kind of like, the rates are finally dropping on the Fed rate, but we're not seeing a lot of the other indicators that we really want to see coincide with that, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
We're in a little bit of a different ball game, I think, than we were in 2008 for many reasons like we've touched on.
Right.
And again, I think, the cost of homes seems to be on the rise to an incredible rate. It's getting to be like really just incredible to see, what people are paying for homes. And we're also seeing rent do that too, though. So that's something to touch on because, $3,500 a month in rent, like $2,500 to $3,500 a month in rent, you might as well be in a mortgage where you're building your own equity.
Exactly. Why pay somebody else's equity, as they say? And I think the benefits of just renting versus owning, or owning versus renting, where if you own a house, you benefit appreciation. You're going to pay down the principal. You're going to have an interest write-offs. And it's just there's different types of buyers in this market. And if you're a renter, I work with a lot of renters that are saying, you know what, it makes sense. Almost the monthly mortgage payment, you're going to pay that to rent a place. And so there's definitely a lot of benefits to that in home ownership.
Right. And we see it, we talk about it sometimes with people and we're saying like, hey, look, like, like you just said, there's so many benefits to the ownership itself because you're going to gain all the gains and you're not giving that to your landlord basically. And, it even makes sense to kind of get in where you can. And then, you could flip that in a few years, whether it be a condo or a single family. And, some of the other things that people kind of think about are, one, can I afford the down payments? And we have programs 3.5%, 5%. So like you really don't need to get to that 20% mark that a lot of people think, you need to be at. Another thing that really coincides with all of that and is super important to understand is that, people are saying, well, nobody's moving right now because of the rates. Nobody wants to buy. They want to sell. It's a great time to sell.
Right.
But nobody wants to buy, right? And so what everybody's saying is as soon as these rates drop, people are going to be throwing their homes back on the market and they're going to be tons more supply, which by nature, when you have way more supply, it brings the price of things down, right?
Exactly.
But they're forgetting the demand side of that equation, right? Supply and demand.
Right.
Now you're going to have, 5 million new eligible borrowers for every 100 grand or whatever it is, like, in absorbent facts that like, now you're going to have all these new buyers. The demand's going to be just there with the supply, right? And
exactly. So the
prices ain't going to drop at that, right?
It is. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's supply and demand, and it's those two varying forces. And right now isn't a bad time to buy because you're not going to have that much competition. And just back to the rent versus buy. I mean, if you do I've seen several calculations on that, but if you rent for 5 years versus own a home for 5 years, you might have close to $100,000 more in your pocket based on some of those factors I mentioned. So that's something to consider where now the rents and the monthly mortgage payments are, evening out to some degree.
Right.
You're and some folks don't realize that if you're paying your mortgage, that's almost a forced savings account. And so you may not get that. You'll get it on the back end eventually if you sell the house or you can take, money out of your house, and you're gonna benefit a a lot versus renting where the money's I was going to say it's flying out the window, but it's going into your landlord's pocket, and they're benefiting by some
Right.
of those factors.
That's really the idea behind the equity. Equity is the difference in the mortgage versus what the house is worth, and
Right.
those gaps between what people have for their mortgage. Because let's say somebody in Wilmington that bought 5 years ago versus what their home's worth today is
Right.
a giant savings account almost of worth and value. And people are like, well, it's not real money, but it actually is tappable with a home equity line of credit and things
Exactly.
like that. So it is actual money you can use in the future.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait till you sell it. I mean, I don't recommend getting into nosebleed debt or anything of that nature. But, if it's something you need to do around the house or something or like an addition, like there are options to tap into that equity. So that's huge. And I know that you had talked about it as a fellow Wilmington dad, something we always pay attention to our schools. And so I think this is a good point to transition from, you mentioned a brand new high school. Before we started filming, you actually mentioned that your kids had been pulled out of the Wildwood for heat reasons and stuff. And I want to
Correct.
circle back to that because one thing I've noticed is we have a shortage of supply, right? Why is it that we're not seeing a massive influx in builds right now? Why doesn't everybody just build a ton of homes? And we're seeing the condos go up everywhere and things like that, but it's nowhere near keeping up with the demand.
Right. And I pretty much have firsthand knowledge of that. My father, also a Wilmington resident,
Yep.
He's built maybe close to 900 homes in his career. And if I had a nickel for every time he said the cost of materials are going up, and now it's not just the
Inflation.
we've
been talking inflation. It's part of it, right?
And then that drives the labor prices
Cost
up
of labor
as well.
because you got to be able to afford to live.
And so
right?
just the cost to build a house has gone up exponentially.
It's incredible, right?
And so it's the builders that a lot of them are doing renovations and just it's the cost of a lot of land. First off, there's not a lot of land available,
right.
and if you find one, it's just that just by just being a rare piece of land, it's going to cost you the cost of the land and then to build it. So it's
incredible.
Yeah, it's inflation.
So it's inflation mixed in with the cost of the products to build the home, but also the cost of labor because we all need more money to live when. If you just think about the groceries that we're all paying for these days, I mean, you can't go to work for the same dollar you went to work for 3 years ago. You have to be asking for a higher, living wage, which then creates higher labor costs, like you said. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up is we've seen in the last 3 years, not only the equity build, not only the markets the way they are with the lower rates, but we've seen an incredible influx in cost of construction and building, right? And so one of the things we were just talking about before this is you had 2 kids actually at the time in the pre-K, I believe, at the time. And I remember coaching. I was coaching hockey at the time, and kids would come up to me, and I was coaching them in lacrosse, and kids would come up to me and be like, Coach, I got to bring a jacket to school. And then all of a sudden it was, Coach, we don't have a school. And I was like, well, what's going on with our schools? And one of them actually was shut down, and the kids were pulled out of it due to like age, and I think it was an oil spill or something.
Correct. Yeah, there was an oil spill, so no heat, and you need you need heat for those kids. Even though sometimes my kids will go in the ocean during the summertime when towards the end of the summer, and it's a cold day, but they don't care how cold the water is. But you need heat at school where
you do.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things you mentioned, new high school, but some of these other schools in town are extremely old, right? And so I think one of the hot topics in town right now, as taxpayers, as homeowners in town, as fathers in town that we've seen, is obviously the conversation surrounding the new school they want to build. They rebuild the Wildwood, and I think, it was voted on. And I think one of the things that's really been talked about, and I don't, we're not going for opinions on this or anything like that, but just the facts is, we're looking at about 200 million people's taxes going up and stuff. And I think, one of the things we mentioned earlier in the show was a turnover in population, so more demand for the schools, and the fact that our other schools are actually literally failing. But one of the conversations, the hot button topic right now in Wilmington is this new school from, I think it's K through 5, $200 million price tag-ish. And I think that people are a little shocked by that, and I think rightfully so. But I also think that like a lot of that is going into what we were just talking about, like the cost of building now. Is just,
and it makes sense that it would be somewhat of a sticker shock number, but at the same time, it's, I think, for people to stomach that, and for people to, take money out of their pocket to pay taxes, that's a lot to stomach. And I again, from a, my everyday job with just building a house, it's probably 350 square feet, price per foot. And that's gone up substantially. Maybe that's doubled in the past, 5-10 years. And that's if a builder builds a house, they're going to pass the cost down to the consumer.
We went from like $1.50 a square foot to we're looking at like $3 to $3.50 a square foot now to build. So we're doubling cost of building and materials and things like that with the labor and everything kind of rolled in, the overhead.
Right.
And I think that's shocking. And I think if you've tried to do work in the last couple of years in your house, it's incredible. Now, let's talk just purely factual from our real estate point of view. So some of the pros, new schools probably will bring up the values on homes. So those are some of your pros, right?
Right.
You do have people coming in to buy the homes in town. That's one of the questions they're going to be looking for is, what are the schools like? How are they built? So there are some pros to it. Cons, if you looked at the taxes and what's going to go up for the cost per house and And
obviously some folks say, how does that benefit me? Maybe my kids have already graduated. They're long gone. And I don't, and that's a concern. How do you, how do you make it fair to everybody? But usually you pay taxes. It's going into one kitty.
And cons is there's an older population they'd be like, why do we want to spend such an inabsorbent amount of money to like rebuild a school that I have not had kids in for years, right?
Exactly.
And then, obviously there's a big population that's going to directly benefit from it. And I like to look at everything. Like, I am actually one of the ones that, I may benefit depending on where, my son decides to go to school, you as well. But, where we decide to enroll him and things like that. So like, I'm actually one of the populations that's directly affected in the positive directly, minus the fact that obviously my tax and stuff. So it's one of those things that, I always like to just ask the questions. I like to find out the facts. I really don't have per se, like, I don't want to, state an opinion one way or the other on this one yet, but it's like, all right, so like, what type of oversight are we going to have? Like, what is the cost nowadays of construction? Where is it going to be built? These are all things the town's been, kind of mitigating. Are there grants available for this?
Exactly. And that's even coupled with the, there's other development items with the whole MBTA project where there's, if you, the state essentially, the state will essentially, fund some of the costs for that, but it does. The only thing maybe the thing I'm most upset about is it seems like there's a lot of traffic around town now with
there is
a lot of the development that'll only get worse, but maybe that's a little bit temporary.
Yeah, traffic. You got half of the Woburn Street Bridge shut down, so you're going back and forth one lane there. So that really affects, 33 and 34 a lot. We got 34 up north, but if you, in any other part of the town, it doesn't really make sense to come 34. And then I noticed down at 31, they have the massive trucking expo there. They're building condos all over the place.
Yeah.
And 31's a state road, but I'm seeing our exits get a little bit busier
crowded
as time goes on. So, it's almost one of those things where, let's say you triple the size of a house, you probably would want to triple the size of the driveway. Right?
Exactly.
Because you're, and let's say you make a 1-family, a 3-family, you're going to need more parking in the driveway. So I think it's that same idea on a micro to macro scale is that, when you're looking at the big picture of these things, especially us in real estate, and I said, like, it's really important to kind of ask questions. Things like, all right, well, let's say we do build a massive new school or the population goes up and massive new condo complexes. What does that entail about us having to spend on roads and infrastructure to support all of that?
Right. And even just building the school itself is, I'm not familiar with the vetting process, but, you bring in multiple vendors to do a lot of the work. You don't necessarily want to go with the cheapest option. You don't want to pay the most amount, almost somewhere in between where, you're going to get the work done right and it's, sufficient. So there's,
tons that goes into it, right?
Yeah, and even just building a school or a home or whatever it is, you're dealing with utilities. You're dealing with, you mentioned driveways and the materials and sourcing that, and
it's incredible what goes into it.
Right? Yeah, it's just a massive project, and hopefully there's you know, I was going to say leadership is there,
oversight, right?
Oversight there to you know, do it the right way.
And so that's a big part of it. And then the other really side of it, you know, and we're just talking facts and kind of doing the pros and cons here, like either way, you know.
Right.
But, you know, that is the future. That is the future taxpayer. That is the future American. Like, you know, no matter really what you support or believe in, education is going to be a big part of that. Like, you know, even if you believe in like national defense, well, who's going to design things in the future? Like, or if you believe in like, you know, I don't know, like it could really be anything you support, like, you know, civil liberties or whatever it is you really are passionate about. An educated population is most likely going to benefit the country.
Yeah,
and so
education
that's a big part.
and
education,
the
right?
future of America. Right. So that's a good place to, if you had to spend your money, you want to,
if you're going to spend it, right?
If you're going to spend it, education's a good thing to spend it.
It's an incredible. And so, like, I guess just kind of standing on the outside looking in, because this is one of those things that I've just, like I said to you, like just being in real estate in general, like I have questions on both sides of those fences. And it's not something I'm sitting here ready to make a decision on like, you know, a broadcasting show or anything like that. But these are all questions that, you know, once I can, you know, if I'm going to make an educated decision on it, I want to at least ask some of these questions on both sides. Is like, you know, I want to ask the hard questions when it comes to costs and oversight and traffic and what does it really mean for the people in terms of taxes. But I also want to ask the hard question, well, what happens if we have schools that don't have heat and the kids are being pulled out of them? Like, so both sides have really difficult questions to answer. And I think that's the key to, you know, really doing anything of this magnitude is like, you know, kind of being educated on everything. Just to understand it. You know?
And it's such a massive project for the school, and hopefully you bring in consultants who are experts who can guide the process and help you make educated decisions on what to do.
Because it's not every company that could handle something of that magnitude. And like you said, you can't just go with the cheapest guy on the block. We're building the future school. Like you need the safety regulations. Probably a lot more regulation when it comes to building a public building like that than there is when it comes to building something on the smaller scale. So there's just so many things to think about, and Wilmington's right there in that right now.
Right. You're going to do it once, so you want to do it right.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're going to end up voting for it, doing it, you're going to, now let's, you know, and I think the winds of change seem to be going in that direction. You know, we've already gotten estimates on our taxes. I think the vote happened. I think the plan moving forward with that, I think they're going to be building a K-5 school at the north site was what was voted on.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think really, now it's time to kind of do those other questions of research. It's like, okay, like, you know, I see what you guys have estimated for costs, like cost overruns, for instance. They built a brand new high school where I grew up in Arlington. Being a part of the Rotary there, I got to tour it and things of that nature. It's gorgeous. But costs, I did notice, like, for instance, there was a big thing. It was right in the Globe that they had wired out funds to a fraudulent company, and it was almost $400,000 in funds. And you know, people don't think about it, but even like little things like that, if you're redoing the construction in your house, you're paying a contractor direct, right? So you're going to watch it. Am I paying for this, that, and that?
Yeah.
On a major scale of macro level, like when you're building a school, it's the same idea. Like you said, you got to bring in different people that are specialized in different things. There's obviously studies that go into the land, that go into, you know, safe zones. That I've looked at the map of Wilmington before, and I've actually been pretty surprised by how much protected land there is in Wilmington. There's a lot of green.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of green in Wilmington.
A lot of green.
And I guess the good thing is that that's one cost that the town, I think, well, there's some developments, obviously, they might have to buy a piece of land, but for some of the schools, is my understanding, maybe that land cost is not. It's you're building on existing land, so
as opposed to new sites.
And that's why it's a little surprising that the number's still up here, where land is usually a bulk of the cost. But
but then you look at the construction costs, the inflation costs. What an incredible undertaking Wilmington's currently dealing with and things of that nature.
Right.
But I mean, a lot of it makes sense. Not to say that, like, you know, the decisions all make sense, but the cost of things, like, I wasn't as shocked as some others about the $200 million. I was like, yeah.
I mean, I think the cost of, you know, loaf of bread just went up since we started recording here. So
probably right. You're looking at more expensive tomatoes when you get to the store tonight since the beginning of this recording, right? Yeah. And it's unfortunate because, like, life is becoming more expensive, and so, you know, I think that's another factor to even play in is like if everything else is more expensive around us, now you're talking more taxes.
Yeah.
You know, and I think this goes back to what we're talking about with that whole, you know, a looming possible recession and things like that. Like we're talking like tough times ahead if we're talking all that. Like, you know what I mean? And I think that's where, you know, people are like, oh, there's going to be a big bubble burst in the housing market. And it's like, well, what if there isn't? I don't know if that, you know, maybe sometimes there's a big, you know, sales price burst. What if there isn't? What if the cost of living just keeps remaining sky high? The cost of food, the cost of goods, the cost of construction. What if this all just continues to really just inflate around us, right?
Yeah, good question.
It's tough.
It is. Yeah, it seems like it's been trending in the wrong direction for quite some time now. Maybe it's the new norm, and we've got accustomed to it to some degree, and everybody's got to cut back in some areas, but hopefully there's some relief and a little bit of a change in direction at some point.
Yeah, and we had the massive pandemic. I mean, we printed $3 trillion in cash. That's a loan we gave to ourselves. Like, you know, people don't realize, like, it's like, this is probably driving costs of things up and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And again, whether your opinion's one way or another on all these things, these are just the facts around us right now, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. And so, you know, with that all being said, we do have a couple big weeks coming up in the industry that we're in. Towards the end of this month, we're seeing a lot more of the very vital reports that, you know, haven't necessarily been predicted correctly, but they might send some shockwaves through those rates and actually drive some of the rates down, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
We got the Fed meeting the same week of course, the biggest looming thing, the election.
Yeah.
Again, whether or not your opinion's on one side or the other, these are massive events that will have huge impacts on the day-to-day American. And again, I'm not saying one way or another on any of these things. They're just massive things coming that, you know, they're coming whether or not we want them to or not.
Right. There's a lot of stuff happening throughout the country at I'll call it the macro level, and even just in Wilmington, a lot going on here as well. So just however you look at it,
100%.
There's a lot going on.
I think Election Tuesday is coincides with the next Fed meeting. I think it's the first week in November. Don't quote me on that, but I think we're looking at the election, the first week in November. We're looking at all the reports at the end of October. And it is hard because that's the thing is I think a lot of people want to say like, oh, this is where the new norm is, or this is where the next recession's coming, or this is when rates will drop. And it's like so many times repeatedly we've been wrong very recently in the last couple of years.
Exactly.
It's very hard to see what's going on before it happens, right?
You can't predict the future. You just want to do, you know, you just want to be practical in what you do, whether you're buying a house or whether, you know, you're involved with building a school, if that's going to happen, whether or not that's going to happen. You know, and I try to live below my means, and that's, you know, I'm trying to do that. And, but
it's harder with the cost of groceries and the cost of living, though. It's like, it's a big chunk of anyone's budget, you know?
Right.
And so like, it is something that as we come into the holiday season, like it reminds us the giving, you know, the community and things like that. Like, you know, these are the times that it's good to kind of keep our ears and our eyes open for like, you know, maybe somebody that you could help during this period, because things are kind of going in a direction that seems to be a little bit more difficult for all of us, and we're in it together.
Right.
You know?
I mean, November's right around the corner, and Thanksgiving, and there's a lot to be thankful for, even
100%.
Despite whatever the economy is doing or what's happening around us. There's just, you know, we all got to help each other out and pull in one direction. So.
And that's kind of where I want to get to, because like I said, we've talked about a lot of touchy subjects here, but trying to stay like, you know, really just in the question sphere of it, not having opinions on a lot of it, just to kind of get these topics out there and discuss them. But one thing I will say that is definite fact that I am not unbiased about is this community and how amazing it really is to each other. You know, whether it be the community funds board that really helps out, the food pantry around here. We have the diaper program.
Right.
There's just so many beautiful things about this
I'm
area.
actually, I forget if I told you about this, but I'm part of the proud member of the Wilmington Minutemen. So you might find me. I was serving up flapjacks or pancakes during the summertime.
So you just don't do reenactments? You do more, huh?
We do more. You just you know, we try to give back, and that's, you know, every year I've been part of it. Maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, but we always do a lot of, or involved in a lot of community events where, serving up pancakes or whatnot, and just try to be involved in the community and give back any way we can.
Right. And one thing that I don't think is debatable is how beautiful this community is in so many ways. Like, I remember our first experience. I had Patrick Giroux on the show multiple times, and like the July 4th events, the Fall Fest, and those are all volunteer committees, and I'm involved with a few different volunteer committees around town. And, I really do think that whatever happens, we're in it together, but that's okay, because if I had to believe in a community, this is definitely one that I believe in, not just living here, but I think we have so many positive things about our community that will, be a safety net to so many people that we are, friends with, that we love dearly, that, and there's so many great aspects of this community. I think that's one of the things, talking real estate about Wilmington, we have seen the cost of homes skyrocket. When I moved here, I didn't see many million-plus homes in Wilmington.
Right.
I think one of the reasons why a lot of us greater Boston kids moved up this way was it was much more affordable at the time than our neighborhoods we grew up in, like Arlington, Cambridge, Lexington, Belmont, Medford. And that's just the north side of the city. You talk Newton, Wellesley, and all that area. Like, things have gone increasingly higher in those areas. So, being able to resettle is a lot of what we've seen. That's a lot of the turnovers, is a lot of the youth coming up and start families here, which is a beautiful start, bright future.
Yeah, I couldn't be more thrilled to raise two kids here.
Right.
And I'm so happy they're going to go through the school system, and it's I grew up in the next town over, Reading, and but I've probably lived here almost half my life.
Right.
And I'm here for the long term. I love it. It's just a great community, and just love waking up here every day.
Right. And I've we're here about 5 years now, and I've completely, like you said, I got thoroughly involved, because one of the things I noticed very quickly about this community is it's easy to love. It's easy to get involved, and there's so much opportunity, which I love, to help and be around it. And, whether it be events like the July 4th, whether it be youth sports, which is where we met, actually.
Yeah.
I think I was your kid's lacrosse coach, and then we were at a massive open house. It was a big house, like real big.
That's right.
And then we met in a bathroom on the third story.
What are you doing here?
Right. What are you in here for? You're like, oh, I'm a realtor. Oh, I'm a loan officer.
Yeah.
Oh, we should link up. But it started, really, the root of our relationship, and a lot of the relationships I built, it started from, service. It started from being able to get involved in such a beautiful community. And, like you said, I'm excited to raise kids in this community.
Yeah, it just seems like wherever, if I go down and grab a sub at a local pizza shop, it just everybody's very friendly and pretty welcoming, and so it's just it's nice to go about your day, and whether I'm grabbing food or at a sports game, or it's just nice people. Nice people that
it is
in this town.
It's a good community built on a great fabric of humans, and I think that's the key to it all. So super excited to have talked Wilmington shop with you, whether it be the real estate market, cost of construction, and all the things we discussed about the schools, because really these are direct things that will affect us moving forward in our futures. We're both young fathers in town, young homeowners in town. So, we're not going anywhere. And so we've both, we've discussed that. This is a place I love, and I'm excited to grow in, and I'm excited to grow with the community. So, I appreciate you coming on today and talking all these subjects, whether they're touchy or not, you know. So,
no, I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. So Kevin Barrett, we appreciate everything. And we're going to have you on again. This has been great. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right.